within the Dynamics CRM product group. So presenting with me is Manju Gabi, and he's also in the same team as me. So just a little bit background of, on our team. What we do is our team is a global team that's under the CRM product group, and then we take care of global customers in the world. So we deal with the largest CRM online customers currently. Right, so Manju and I is actually always run into a situation where, oh, you know what, a customer coming to us, hey, you know what, I need another instance of Dynamics CRM under the same tenant. Right, so I mean, when it actually comes to asking us for another instance, and we always is like, hey, what do you need another instance for? Right, so I mean, instead of actually just give them an instance, we're trying to help them understand why they need it, right, and then how they're going to go about it, right. So Manju is working with a customer, and it's also I work with that customer as well. That they right now have like more than 60 instances in the tenant, right. So I mean, how we go about it and how we figure out what is the right approach of actually getting them an instance, I think that's something that we want to actually carry out in this 40 minutes, right. So I think this is what I'm going to do. So before I actually jump into the presentation, right, maybe I can actually lay the foundation of this presentation by telling you guys a customer story, right, a customer scenario that we dealt with, so we can actually follow in our presentation and why we're actually telling you this, right. So one of the things that we deal with a customer, they have multiple businesses, right? But one of the businesses are dealing with the building, is in the building business. So they deal with elevators, and they also deal with air conditioning units. So just imagine that you are in the business of a building, right? You're trying to actually build a building, you need an elevator, right? But in a building, you need an air conditioning unit, right? So this is actually works well together. But I mean, I can tell you that even though they're the same company, their elevator business doesn't know what the air conditioning business units are doing, right? And the air conditioning business service doesn't know what the other side is doing. So they really need a system to really glue them together so they can know, hey, you know what? I'm actually working in the same building, same account, right? For example, maybe the Marriott, right? They're building a new hotel. They need elevators in there, right? And however, they have AC. They can actually do the cross-selling. But up until they have CRM, right, they cannot tell, right? They cannot actually grow the business by actually, oh, you know what, we are really working with this account. And the air conditioning side, oh, you know what, we might actually able to help you guys and maybe upsell. It's the same company, however, it's two different business, right? So when they actually go into this and they come to us, Microsoft, hey, you know what can you do to help us? First of all, they need a system, but this is a global company, right? That's not only dealing with just the US alone. So they have offices all over the world. So they have in EMEA, Asia, that includes China, Hong Kong, Singapore. Basically anywhere there's buildings and elevators and air conditioning, they have offices there, right? The business is not only selling, right? The business is going to be servicing as well. So there's one of some business scenarios they're going to be running into is, hey, I have this customer, but I don't have a system, but I know that I have elevator in there, but the repair business is actually drive them, the growth. But however, they don't even know if this customer is actually, is a VIP customer or is not a VIP customer. They may be spending quite a bit of time in this non-VIP customer versus this VIP customer, right? So they really need a system to see. However, with this, for that being said, right, they have the air conditioning business unit, and then there is the elevator, right? And then all over the world, they have different offices. They might have local requirements. You can actually imagine the complexity that we're dealing with, right? Then they come to us and say, hey, you know what can you do to help us, right? And especially on instance, right? How can we actually, figure out what's the right instance strategy that we're going to use so we can actually grow this system instead of not just only implementing it and growing it as well, right? So this is actually a real case, real customer that Manju and I are actually dealing with at this moment. Okay, then this presentation is pretty much like some of the lessons that we learn and work with the customer, understand the requirement, and then some of the lessons that we learn and we want to actually share with you. So feel free if you have any questions and ask us. This is going to be a pretty short session, right? So, I mean, the agenda is pretty straightforward, right? The why, the what, and the how, right? And then why we're taking a multi-instance deployment, right, and then approach of doing a deployment for Dynamics CRM Online, right? Dynamics CRM is just not just only a single instance, right? What are the key benefits and considerations when you actually either work with the customer, right, or maybe a partner working with the customer, or you're doing the implementation of that project? What are the things that you need to consider, right, when you actually think about multi-instance, right? And lastly, I would just want to tell you guys how to do a successful implementation. Some of the things that we learned, maybe you can actually take it back. I'm not expecting you to actually get everything, but I mean, at least a couple of things that you can take it back, right, and then that will be really helpful, right? So before we even go into the presentation itself, just get the term, because this is, just want to get everybody on the same page. What does it mean by geo, right? When we actually use the term geo, meaning is geography, right? So, I mean, in CRM Online, Dynamics CRM Online for Microsoft, even though they have, right, even Microsoft has data centers all around the world, CRM Online data centers, we are in 8 different regions. In each regions, right, we have 2 geos. So right now, as you can see that we have in North America, South America, EMEA, Asia Pacific, Japan, India, Oceania, which is Australia. We have a data center in Australia, and Canada, right? India and Canada, we added recently, right? So the Microsoft Online Services tenant, so if you spin up an Office 365 subscription, right, that is a tenant, right? Just be careful that tenant, the place, the country, the region that you're going to actually spin up that subscription, you cannot move it. But I mean, under that tenant, you can have multiple instances of CRM, meaning different databases and associated to that subscription. So that's why the instance, what it means is you sign up for a CRM trial, right? A Dynamics CRM Online subscription, an instance is created for you, a database is created for you, you can actually access it. So under that subscription, that you can actually have instances across the world if you have the multi-geo enabled, right? So when it actually goes to multi-geo, right? So what it means is you can have CRM instance in different part of the world. It's okay, Madhu. Yeah, in different part of the world, right? So that means it's like let's say you have a subscription in North America, you can have a CRM instance in Europe, you can have a CRM instance in Singapore, right, and Hong Kong, and vice versa, right? So I just want to point out here, when we talk about multi-geo, it doesn't mean that it's a geo replication, meaning that you have an instance in the US and you have an instance in Europe. The data is not automatically replicated. Okay, so it's 2 separate instances at this moment, but I mean, I understand that there are things that sometimes, hey, you know what, because of latency, performance issue, I might want to actually replicating the data. So we actually go into more and see why, right? And then if you think that because of latency, that you want to actually replicate the data to other regions, that might not be the right approach of solving that performance issue. Okay, now,
Question?
Yes.
So you're saying if you have 2 instances in different, you only still have 1 tenant though.
Yes.
So how can you have an instance in Europe that's in a tenant that's in North America?
How can you have a tenant?
Didn't you say you have 1 tenant and you have 2 instances, 1 in North America, 1 in Europe?
Yes, you can have the instances. So an instance can only tie to 1 subscription, 1 tenant. So
that's different than a deployment in on-prem, isn't it?
it's different than deployment on-prem. So when I use the term tenant and subscription, they are the same. So if 1 subscription can have multiple instances, so multiple instances tied to a subscription / tenant, right? And then 1 instance of CRM can only tie to 1 subscription. It cannot tie to multiple subscriptions because it's for billing. Okay? Now I'm going to actually pass it over to Manju so we can actually go over the whys. What are the benefits? Okay? Hand it over to you. Thank you.
So some of the... Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. So when we started working with this customer, the most common question they ask, or we ask them, why do they need multiple instances? And that took us a long time to just understand the requirements, where they, how they even look at CRM Online, because most of them either come from on-premise world, and whether they have one instance running in one region and they try to access from different regions. And given what's happening around the world from a data residency perspective, people started coming back and say, hey, we have regions where we cannot move data, and then they ask us, how do we come up with a multi-instance strategy and what requirements should we be looking at? So if you really look at some of the key things, what's happening in the world today is around the security requirement and data compliance. From a data compliance standpoint, with the new EU regulations, we cannot move data from European Union outside. So if any data has to be staying in the European Union for user to access. And the same happens in China or in Australia. There are requirements where the data has to reside in that country. So that's one of the reasons why we look into a multi-instance strategy. And the second is the more of an autonomous business units. Even in a companies like I'm looking at a retail industry, where even though their one group is working more on the sales aspect of it, and the another group is more working on the catering a whole different business users or consumers. So even though, as Darren said, it can all rely on in the same subscription, but each have their own IT department, each catering to a different need, each have their own release cycle, and so on. So it becomes more of a business unit where they have their own production instance and a development going on versus another, even though they all are part of the same IT department. And then also from a geography perspective, now we have more customers globally distributed. They have a sales team in India, there's a sales team in Europe. So they like to have their instances situated where the cluster of their users located today, instead of everybody accessing an instance in North America. Which brings up a question. They say, oh, how do we do reporting? So one of the things we do tell them is if you want to have a holistic customer 360-degree reporting, what you could do is you could either aggregate into another data warehouse system. That's a common thing to do. Or some customers say, okay, can we create another CRM instance? Try to just use that for a reporting purpose because we have CRM security enforced. So some customers approach reporting in a different way. One, they create a data warehouse centrally, pull all the data, and create reports using Power BI or other reporting platform. And from a security requirement, again, that's another thing which plays into different regions, whether controlling the data, who sees what, and also introducing a little bit more localization from a compliance perspective. They would go and say, okay, we want to restrict this data further because due to the competition or the compliance in that country, or whether the union laws, or from a field service perspective, they try to introduce more security through localization. So one of the things people ask is, what are the key benefits of using the CRM Online in an instance? Again, in an on-prem world, you have one, it's equivalent to an organization in an on-prem deployment. So when we move into, as Darren was saying, that if you're under a single tenant with multiple instances, you get a lot of benefit out of it, meaning that if you're already federated with your Active Directory on-premise, you'll get a single sign-on. And then you could introduce security groups, which many of this, when you have more than 10 instances on a subscription, you do not want some other group, which is like an autonomous business unit, as we talked about, to say, hey, can I go and log into the instance of another department? Because if you're granted a CRM Online license, by default, you get access to all instances. So by using multiple instances on a single tenant, through security groups, you can control which users have access to which instance. And through CRM security role, you can further authorize, okay, who can see the data. And also one of the most important is from an admin perspective. If you have multiple customers we are working, they have around 60 instances in a tenant. So from a global Office 365 administrator, you can see how simplified it is. Now you can see the whole view of all the users who have access. And through Azure Active Premium Directory, he can run reports when was the last time they logged in. So they get a lot more admin privileges, enable MFA, so they can control who is using the system and how often. And the most important, which people sometimes forget, is the storage. The storage is really shared across all instances. So if they have purchased 50 gig of storage, they have to really coordinate with all their business units so that not one group goes and utilizes more storage than the other group. So that's where the coordination comes in between the groups if they're using the multiple instance strategy. And this was one of the valuable lessons we learned as we were working with this customer is they have this different business areas. Again, they have, even though they have elevators and air conditioners, sometimes the business process have been common, like how they want to run business. It's more of what they want in future versus what they have today. And then they said, okay, how do we make sure that we come up with a set of common business process versus, and then ability to localize in each country. And so one of the benefit of multiple instances, you can start thinking about as a company, okay, how do I, like a business process re-engineering. So we have all these acquisitions and different groups of people coming in, all wanting to do something. Somebody's using Excel to do certain part of the business process. Some other country in Netherlands, they've always been doing this way. So the companies which work globally, they're thinking, okay, let's come up with a common business processes and then yet give enough flexibility for each region to do what they need to do. So we look at different kind of regional and country models and different business areas to see how best, because people always say, oh, I'll create another instance also. The extreme case is more instances you create from an ALM perspective, quality control and so on also becomes unmanageable. It's just that coming to that middle ground where you kind of have a strategy, at the same time you're not going overboard in creating too many instances, which adds cost and also maintenance. And I think this is the most part when you're thinking about an online multi-instance strategy is to really have a set of business users, technologists, solution architects, sitting and really spending time. Okay, what is the common set of functionality that we want to build? Because so that at the end you want to maximize the reuse. Because once you come up with the maximizing the reuse, which means that you can comply with the upgrade policy quickly, you'll have much more innovation you can do quickly and roll it out to your regions. So the regions only have to do very minimum customization or localization. I think this is the, if anything that I want to impress is just spending a lot of time thinking through what is the common business processes that you want to kind of enforce from a global level. And this is kind of we thought through, okay, what is, if I have to summarize it one way, like what are the key areas that you want to look at? Some of the things we saw as from a localization, if you have multiple instances, it makes it easy versus when you have a single instance. Some customers have done single instance where solution became overly customized because everyone says, oh, I need this attribute, and then I need this attribute. In the end, in the account entity, you'll end up with like 200 attributes or so because everybody wants their attribute in the entity, and everybody wants their plugin to behave certain way. So it became so overly complicated, the solution started becoming performance issue, data integrity issue, reporting problems. So that's where we kind of, if you look at the more multiple instance, that gives you a balance, but again, you need to weigh the cost versus going back, okay, do I have all the common functionalities so that I'm not re-implementing in each region? And then the most other aspect is the storage and the instance cost. Again, the cost associated with those, because the more instances that you have, not only you're paying for it, second, when it comes to the upgrade, there's a project cost associated with it, meaning there'll be a downtime or there will be a place where you need to do quality testing. Like if you have more production instances, you have to schedule more time to do to the quality performance testing and so on. And the second is the development complexity. I think the way we saw is even though in multiple instances, again, if you have common set of functionality, your development complexity may reduce. But if you don't think ahead and not have a common platform, then your development complexity could increase as well. because sometimes customers say, oh, well, I'll take this solution, I'll deploy it in 6 regions, and the 6 regions now have their own mini implementation going on. So there's no commonality between these, even though they're all using Dynamics CRM, but from a reuse perspective or an ALM perspective, all doing their own thing. Sure.
Would you ever use a managed solution in that scenario?
Um,
Ship your core stuff in a managed solution?
Yes, that's one of the things. If you have the common set of functionality built and agreed upon, that would be, so the central team will be building a managed core solution and sending it to the regions, and regions are only extending it and adding the additive. So if you build a version 2.0, you're sending in a version 2.0 of your managed solution. That would be the ideal where we want all the architects and the business process engineers to think through. And then the report in the ISV solutions, because once you start using ISV solution, this is something you have to keep in mind both from a licensing perspective, and also if you customize the ISV solution, you need to ensure that the same versions are deployed everywhere, and also any kind of testing that needs to be done also needs to take into account. I think these, like when we look at these things, yes, does a single instance or the multiple instance a good way to go? Answer is yes, but it takes a lot more thinking up front. You need to have an alignment with especially with your business users, because they need to buy in, because the change is always hard, because each region may have their own P&L, each region may have their own how they like to do things, and they don't want to always say, hey, no, we don't really want to change it because this is how we like to do things. So having that upfront conversation with the business users and the IT to say, okay, this is how we like to move forward, and having that buy-in can reduce, you can really take advantage of the multi-instance, because it makes your ALM story easy, you can innovate faster, and also, more importantly, give a better user experience and the adoption for the end users.
Thanks, Manju. Yeah, so I think that Manju actually covers the what, right? Why we're having multiple instances. But I can tell you that one of the things that we learn is when we're working with that customer is that because there's a huge need for a dynamic CRM system, so they only have a short duration of deploying the system to their business users, right? Basically, they purchase it, right, and then they just want to, oh, you know what? I want to go live in a month. Right, so they did not spend enough time to really think about how they're going to do that implementation, at a global level, as well as the country level, even though going to the district level of what they want. So in the global level, everybody says, oh, you know what? We can actually make our entire world using a common business process, right? It's easier to say than done. It's not that easy when it actually comes to a point that, hey, you know what, you have to go to other country, right, understand their requirement. So really simple, right, maybe when you're actually looking at the form, in the North America business at a high level, they might be capturing the same information, but when you go to China, they might want to actually capture additional information related to the customer and their process, even though at the high level are the same, but the details are different, right? So, this is that doubles in the detail. So, the hows is that when we actually go into, do the implementation for them, and we're discovering all the issues, and then we're surfacing back, right? So if you attended my session on best practice earlier this week, we talk about architectural foundational components. This is definitely one of them, right? And data model is one of them, and then this instance strategy is one of them. Because it's like once you figure out instance strategy, that you're gonna actually, especially on a global deployment like this, they want to actually have a data model that's common, right? Of course, when you actually have the common layer, they can spend time and build on top of what the common layer is. And then when you actually maintain it, right? So going back to your question about managed and unmanaged solution, right? Even though it's a managed solution, you have to set the right expectation with the different, geographic regions and countries, right, of when that is going to be coming, because that is actually impacting their business if there's common data model change. And then once you create a dependency on the localization of the solution to the base common solution, then you create more problems for yourself. That needs to be planned out, communicated. So let's go through with the hows, right? And I think that I talked through many of those challenges already, right? So I mean, many disparate CRM implementations in various subsidiaries, basically different locations, right? Each location have their own flavor, right? The devil is in the details. I cannot say that enough, right? Because it's, I think, high level, same, devil is in the details, because every country is going to be, and then you need a program manager organization, program management organization to make decisions. To really, because otherwise, I mean, you let the country make decision, and then it's not going to work. So you need to have a centralized point of making decisions for them, right? And then I already covered that lack of standardizations across the business process. So each country may be doing things their different way, right? But when they actually come to a global solution, you need to actually define the business and get agreements ahead of time, right? So you need to get from different business units an agreement of their business process, right? And then some of the challenges, like it's not even just talking about the complex business. One of the things that they may have offices over in another location, right, US, and they have offices in Asia. I see a lot of customers, especially the global customers, they have offices in China, especially in the manufacturing space, because China can manufacture stuff over there, right? So, so when they actually go over to the offices, try to access the instance in the US, right, always a latency issue, a low bandwidth latency, especially inside the country in China. There's a China wall, right? So I mean, going out of China, accessing the instance in US is going to be really slow. So I mean, a lot of our customers think, hey, you know what? Okay, can we actually replicate this entire instance locally in that country, right? And then solve our latency issue? But that is, I think, is the wrong approach. Maybe you might have to do that at the end of the day, but really you have to go through your business requirement, understanding the pros and cons, right, before you're actually doing it. Because when you're replicating data, you have the traffic, you're basically replicating the database, right? And you have to actually maintain the entire solution and different set, right? I mean, that's just a problem that we heard in the product group, and we're trying to think, actively looking into ways to actually solve that problem. So this circle can be out of the box, out of this picture right here, right? But I mean, at this point, to solve that latency issue, right, and the performance issue, there's quite a things you can do. Like some of the things you can do is actually moving a data center location if in the US, right? If your headquarters in Europe, and then you might actually figure out a sweet spot where everybody can actually connect to that data center, that solves your problem. So if you have offices in China, I can tell you that if you are a US-based company, move all your organization to the West Coast, right? That's where all the fibers to Asia is going through the Pacific, right? Then it will, if you have orgs, CRM instances in the East Coast, you move it to the West Coast, you can pretty much see almost 50%, reduce in latency, and then also the performance is going to be better, right? And then the next thing you can actually think is looking at third-party products like Riverbed. I'm not, that actually help do the network optimization, right? To actually solve that, latency performance issue, right? It doesn't need to be replicating another instance, creating another instance for it, right? Right. So the last one is I cover is the challenges of short implementation timeline. It's really, like I said, right? I mean, you need to plan the project, right? So I mean, I understand that the business really want a system. They're on Excel right now, and they don't have visibility. But spend a little bit of time of planning it will save you a lot of time and headache in the future, right? So that's why this is even though you try to plan out instance strategy, gather I think the architect, you need an architect that actually work with you, and then also get the business together in a room, maybe in a location in a room, lock them down in a week, right, in a room for a week like this, big room, right? And then you can actually tell them, hey, you know what, this is what we're gonna do, this is the process, business process we're gonna solve, right? And get agreement, try to get agreement on a common data model, right? Once you get that common data model, of course, you lock it down, right? And then you can actually, based on that geographics, requirement, you can actually put solutions on top of it. And then going back to solutions, right? Solutions of what we have right now is managed solution, but our solution is actually better. It's easier because we have patching, right? And then we have different, as our solution is now at the teenage level, right? Back then it's still in child level. And then I'm sure that we're gonna actually change that model, right? And then Matt Barber is the program manager who actually handles solutions. You can actually find out more, right? But I mean, we do have a roadmap for solutions, and it will help solve some of the, problems. Because CRM is growing right now, and you get to a point that we have a lot of global implementations, right? Okay, so right, I think I covered some of the recommendations that address global deployment already, which means is understand the business processes and requirements at the global and subsidiary level. Right, this is a must. You really need to have that understanding of the business process. Okay, and then you need to actually create a program structure for the project. Right, it's not just jumping in, just a small team, but you need to actually have a program structure, like maybe a PMO office. That's what we did for our customer. Not necessary for applies to you, but I think that you need a team to actually manage the program. Right? When I'm looking, if you're going to be deploying to this many countries, you have to do that, right? And then you need a realistic rollout plan, right? Includes all regions, right? Maybe a release plan. Hey, you know what? For this time frame, I'm going to release it to this region, right? In the North America. In the next phase, we're going to release it to, Asia or Europe. You need a realistic, right, plan to communicate, right? And form a team, right? And then sometimes it's, if that the customer they will want to do it themselves, right? However, it's okay to actually get some help from a solution integrator. If you're going to actually do this global deployment, right, it's okay to actually get help from maybe a partner that actually done this before, like give you some guidance, and then get your team up to speed on how to do this global implementation, right? And then common architecture. I talk a lot about what are the common foundational components you need to do, right? I think for instance is definitely one of them. Right, you need to have a common data model is going to be one of them. And even though strategy for integration and data migration, right, how you extract data out of the system is something that you really need to standardize. Right, maybe each country, they might have different way of extracting data, right? And then they might have different approach of actually putting data in the instance. However, to reduce the maintenance, also headache that you're going to be dealing with that, you better to define all those big rock items, I call it, that ahead of time, and then start your deployment, right? Lastly, out of the box subscription, you don't have the multi-geo capability enabled. This is really easy one, right? If you want to enable that multi-geo component, it allows you to create instances that's in your subscription/tenant, right? That you need to actually call Microsoft or open a support ticket and have them, hey, I need to enable multi-geo in my subscription. After you enable multi-geo in your subscription, then you were able to actually create instances that's under the same tenant, right? So you're going to see it in the URL. So if the US is CRM, right, the tenant name .crm.dynamics.com. In the other region, it's going to be CRM4, it's Singapore, right? And then it's 5, 6, and then you can see the CRM is telling you which region that it's going to be in for that tenant, okay? Right, I think that, like I said, right, does not necessarily need a PMO for a deployment, but if you're going to have a deployment, right, a global deployment, you definitely need a team, right, to actually make decisions, right? So I mean, there's local requirements, right? However, the common set of business process, common set of requirements, right? You need to actually have a PMO to really help drive those decisions and drive those implementations, right? And then also agree and work with the local team on the implementation timeline, right? And then this is just a sample of what the PMO looks like that we have formed for one of our customers. And then, as you can see that, you have the global program management office, right? A technical steering committee, right? A program manager at the lower level. You have some architects, you have some SMEs, right? And then, because we're dealing with call center as well, and that we have like call center SMEs, different work streams. So at the end of the day, this project becomes a pretty big program for this customer that we are working with. Right, and then the house, right? The house is the project implementation consideration, right? You need a rollout plan, a project plan, I already emphasized that, right? And then also, a project implementation methodology and an execution plan. So I think that, everybody right now could be, some of the countries, right? They still using their waterfall approach of doing implementation, or they don't even know what a methodology is, right? So I think it's important for the PMO office, right, to help them to make that decision, educate them. Hey, you know what is going to be our approach of actually doing this project? I think what we have seen really work well is going to be the iterative methodology, right? Agile, if you're going to be a brand new project, they are not familiar with it. Agile is going to be really fast, right? 2 weeks duration, and then they probably not able to actually get used to that flavor of methodology. So iterative, you can define your duration, maybe 4 weeks to 6 weeks. I think a sweet spot that we saw is between 4 to 6 weeks, right? You can get the requirement, because immediately agile, meaning that you have a good team. You already have a team in place, right? Once you formalize that team, maybe the first phase, first release, you can actually use iterative. And if you think that's too slow for you, maybe the next phase, you can actually think, hey, you know what, you already have the team member, everybody's familiar with this, and you can actually move a little bit faster. Maybe string the iteration to a shorter duration up until that 2 weeks time frame, right? Okay, the third point is agreement on global solution architecture. So I already covered, right? Architecture is important, meaning that the data migration, integration, how we're going to be, doing it, right? Even though instance talking to instance, how we're aggregating data, needs to have a common agreement in place. So I think that maybe each region they have their own architect that's responsible for implementing the system. It is the right time to bring them together and talk about an approach, an agreement for this, how we're going to roll out Dynamics CRM, even though there's so many multiple instances that you're going to have. Okay. So solution design considerations, right? And then the understanding the solution structure, like managed versus unmanaged. And then I think one of the things that we need to agree on is the versioning. Right, so what's going to be the base versioning, right? And then if you're going to have patches to it, how are we going to actually increment them, right? And then also that for the local solution, how are you going to name those solutions, and how are you going to actually apply those solutions, right? And then those are things that you need to actually come up with, right? Put that in place so everybody can be on the same page, even though that's important for the project team and development team as well, right? So global, local process, I already covered, right? Local, they may have different business processes, right? The devil's in the details again. Localization consideration might be multiple languages, right? And then maybe the common platform, they may only enable for one language, right? Maybe going to another country, they need the Spanish enable or Chinese enable in China. So you have to actually consider those localization requirements in there, right? And organization change management activities. So I mean, if there's changing the business process, the way that they're actually doing things, you need to actually think about it up front and how to communicate that, because it's a change form, right? So one of the things I want to point out here is support and deployment approaches. Because we are not just building it, right? Once you build it, deploy it, you need to support it, right? So just think about support. Yeah, you need to think about patching it, right? And then you need to actually how to fix the issues, and you have to actually lay that foundation up front, right? Even though you're patching it, you have to actually let them know if it's going to be emergency fix, when you're going to be pushing out, right? If it's not emergency, what is your patching schedule, duration and things like that. All those things need to figure it out, right? And going support deployment approaches, especially you have that common solution, right? When you go be patching that common solution, you really need to communicate it ahead of time, because it's like everybody is going to get impacted. Just imagine the solution that Manju has, right?
And
60, right?
Another thing when you go to deployment operation is to really think about your tiered support, like who is your tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3.
Yep.
Because when you're doing a global deployment, you have users around the globe, and they're calling for asking for help. And so having that support organization in place, okay, where is your tier 1 support at, where is your tier 2, and following the 24/7 model really becomes follow the sun model becomes very key for user adoption. And also when you're going through the stabilization phase is to really invest a lot of time in the code reviews, like looking at some of the things we have seen where customers just introduce a fetch XML statement and querying like 15, 20 columns when they only need like 2 or 3, which is causing more of a performance bottleneck creating on their own. So just looking at those SDK operations and really looking at those like, hey, am I utilizing the APIs correctly? Am I doing the right things? You can catch a lot of things up front in your stabilization phase. So when you go to the deployment, you already know what kind of patterns you can expect, and also train your support and your tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 to be prepared when there is a particular pattern arises. So already know what part of the code that they have written could be this area that they want to look at.
Yeah. Right, that's right. And then moving on, right, budgetary responsibilities, because if you're going to be thinking about instance, right, they're local, maybe is responsible for paying for the instance, right? So I think that you need to actually say that up front to them, hey, you know what, you're going to be paying for this much. Otherwise, you're going to have surprises at the end that everybody is, hey, you know what, the global level, you need to get pay for it, right? Communication plan and engage with a SI. Form a team. And the last thing I would like to point out, if you're going to be actually doing these global implementations, right, spinning up multiple instances, it's a visa requirement. So if you're going to have a team doing work especially in a different country, I learned because I thought I have a US passport, I could go anywhere and work anywhere, right? That's not true, right? So if I'm going to have a team from India, they try to go to Hong Kong, they can only work in Hong Kong for 14 days. It takes 3 months for them to actually get a visa, right? So for my project, at the end of the day, I have to ship myself to India to actually work with the India team, right? Even though the business is actually in Hong Kong. So that's something that, just watch out when you think about this project for doing this type of global project. These are the things that hopefully you can think about, right? Right, and then lastly, that I talk about enable multi-geo capability in your subscription, right? So once you enable multi-geo, you can actually see that when you configure the instance, you can actually see that you have the option of selecting which region that you're going to have your instance is going to be in, right? And then once you enable it, you can actually see that, oh, you know what, this in region is what you can do in that region. So, but out of the box by default is not enabled. So you need to actually call Microsoft up and call us up, and we're going to enable it for you.
Is there a cost associated with enabling it?
No, there's no cost, right? And then you can actually turn it on, right? And then you can actually try it out. Because a lot of companies that I deal with is that, hey, you know what? We have latency performance issues, okay? Can we actually spin up an instance maybe in Hong Kong, right? And then from the US, we can actually do some latency testing and see how that performance is like. So they actually have an instance spin up in Hong Kong, right? And then you can trash it after you're done, right? So you have the ability to do that, right? So, okay. And then that's it. And then we open up for questions. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. It's a small audience. So.
What's your advice if you have like two instances, one in Europe and one in the US on-prem, and only for report purpose, data is kind of replicating in one environment to the other? What's the best practice?
So your question is related to if you have two instances, one is in the US, one is in Europe, right? It's currently on-premise. On-premise, you're trying to replicating data? Reporting, okay.
So what's the best practice?
So I think that, my personal opinion, if you're going to...
I don't see them going to
Cloud, okay. Yeah, so if, just for reporting purpose, right? So I mean, are you replicating from instance to a second instance instead of data warehouse?
Yes. From instance one to instance two and vice versa.
Okay, so if you're doing that, no, well, I should say...
Yeah, that's a bad approach. That's how.
The correct approach, in my opinion, should be, you get the data, right? Instead of actually replicating it both, you should be replicating in a data warehouse for reporting. Yeah, that should be the right approach. And then, when I did my implementation, we did actually do that because one of the air conditioning unit business, right? And then once the elevator business, right? Because they want to do cross-selling. And, oh, you know what? I want to see what this elevator is doing, business is doing, right? Maybe work in the same account. They want to know who the people that they're in contact with. They did replicating it, even though it's online. But I mean, for online, you cannot just connect two instances together. You need to actually go through a service bus, right? So you can do the replication. But the correct way of doing it, it should be going to the data warehouse, right? And then in our product roadmap, there's going to be a data sync framework, right? Sync it to the Azure SQL. And then I think there's going to be something pretty exciting, which I'm not sure if I can allow to share it yet, but it's aggregating your data. You're going to have pretty much a dashboard you can see from different instances, right? But I don't know if it's released yet, but I mean, yeah. But, yeah, hopefully I answer your question. Okay?
I think you mentioned you could do your warehouse in a third instance of CRM?
It's a choice. I mean, you could use just some customers have done that. I mean, it's not a only way. Or you could just have your own SQL server. analysis service to do it.
Yeah. So I mean, that Manju is correct. Manju is correct where we have customers that they're trying to aggregate data into the third instance, but just imagine the headache that you have to deal with, right? Just the security that you have to maintain, and then you have your data, right? If you're going to be just doing reporting, right, and not operating, because the goal of actually consolidating data for reporting is for management to actually see, right? I would think that that's the wrong approach of doing it, in my opinion, right? But I think the right approach would be doing it, would be aggregating it to a data warehouse, right? And you can actually do analytic on top of it. That should be
I
the
think
right
the
architecture.
only thing is, which I always remind, which customers kind of think, oh, my CRM security roles will be propagated, right? We always tell them no, because when you think of a data warehouse, it's not just you're bringing Dynamics data, you could be bringing SAP data, you can be bringing all sorts of ERP data. So the security has to be very specific who you want to give access to.
Yeah, pay attention to our roadmap, and then we have definitely something to address that problem, right? And then that gather data from different data sources and mash it up in a dashboard to show it, right?
So in your instances in different geographies, do you just have one business unit per usually?
We have
We
business unit. We have like two. It based on the requirement. The one that we have 2 business units in there, right? Because I think that one is actually related to the sales department, one is actually related to the service department, right? So when you actually go down to the level of details, I can tell you that in North America, to our customer, all the sales guys share the leads. But we actually go to a country like China, the sales guys, it's like, I don't want to let you know my leads because it's like, that's my baby, that's my pot of money. So that's why that, when you actually, even though they have the same business process, right, actually selling stuff, the security requirement is different. So at the end of the day, right, when we actually work with them, hey, you know what, because of this requirement, we cannot have you in the same instance, right? Basically, you need to have a different instance of actually doing the business. So that we give them a different instance for the China, region that they're doing the selling, right? Another advice that I would always want to give to my customers it's very easy to combine. It's really difficult to break up, right? So I don't want to use that analogy, but I mean, I have an analogy for it, but the advice is like, if you have 2 business processes, right, you have 2 data sets, you can easily combine them, right? But if you combine them and those solutions actually mix together, right, it's going to be heck of the work to actually separate them out, right? So just keep that in mind, right? I mean, if you're going to be having 2 instances, right, only if there's business requirement driven, and then you can actually have 2 instances, the reporting, you can actually consolidate the data and do the reporting, right? And then in the future, if you're going to be, doing, consolidations, you can actually consolidate in the future if there's a need. I can tell you that when Manju and I worked with this customer, right, they were in one happy family, when they first started the project, right? In the middle of the project, all right, the business of elevator and air conditioning, we decided to split, right? So if we actually went ahead and used a single instance for the deployment, right, and we will have a big headache of how we're going to actually split those 2 businesses up, right? And it's even data segregation, that's a mini project itself. But now, I'm glad that Manju and I were guiding them to the right direction, right? Having different instances for that business, right? And it may be different country, depends on the requirements, right? And security requirement, data and compliance requirements. And we split in another instance, right? So I mean, it saved a lot of work. It saved them quite a bit. So that's why they're really appreciative. So I mean, that's why that I just like, this is a lot of lessons learned in this in multi-instance, so careful. And then plan on. So any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending.